Amy Johnson, Michael, Associate Professor Celeste, and Benjamin and Colin to present their paper on if it wasn't flex, I wouldn't have passed undergraduate student experience of flexible delivery models. It sounds interesting, very interesting topic. Thank you, Amy. I think you are presenting on behalf of your team.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Celeste is here as well and is going to rescue me because I've had a dodgy internet day today. So if you suddenly can't hear me, Celeste will jump in. And we also have Sarah, our wonderful research assistant, and Colin Beer is here as well today. Our colleagues Benjamin and Michael couldn't make it. But look, so what is all this about? So undergraduate university students are busier than ever, and we know this, right? Like they're juggling paid work and caregiving responsibilities and increasingly demanding university schedules. So combining this with recent challenges in the tertiary ed sector, these pressures have really reignited interests in cost-effective, high-quality and really flexible online delivery models. And what is hyperflexible learning in a nutshell? It's an approach which offers really great flexibility to students, including flexible course start and end dates, the abilities for students to progress through unit material, as well as extension or long extension or non-set due dates. And if you're familiar with the CQU's Be Different platform, that's a style of hyperflexible learning. And I'm so excited that we've been put in this session, and you'll hear about the Be Different platform from my colleagues in the next session. So the STRIVE project, which has been funded by a Learning and Teaching Research Development Grant, was put together to investigate the feasibility of hyperflexible learning approaches in undergraduate education. So it tries to draw on CQU's position as a leader in flexible learning to really find out, could this work in an undergraduate space? Because of course we know that the learning needs of undergraduate and postgraduate students can be really, really different. So some of it is also universities offer flexibility, you know, it's on all the brochures, but is it really? And sometimes promises of flexibility can actually disguise the true demands of tertiary education. So if we think about it, you know, we might say it's online learning, it's flexible, but we still keep dragging the students into set kind of time structures at various points in the term. They have to meet assessment due dates. They have to meet census date. They have to meet all of these other dates that we set to them. And how flexible is that truly for them? So hyper-flexible learning approaches can be really great for students who, for a wide range of really valid reasons, can't fit into typical higher education time structures. So what were we looking at? We were guided by these research questions. Mostly the advantages, disadvantages, and issues that undergraduate students and teaching staff face when experiencing and implementing high flex learning models. We also wanted to know how engagement and retention was impacted or influenced for students in a high flex learning model, and what recommendations we can make about high flex models in undergraduate courses. So what we did is we took 4 units from our Bachelor of Arts degree and we adapted them into a high flex model by removing assessment due dates throughout the term. So it's actually quite anxiety inducing when you think about that. And I've got some staff data that talks about some attitudes of staff when it comes to removing due dates. But that's what we were trying to do. If we take the due dates away, what does that mean? We tracked students' engagement, so we sent them weekly surveys, and we also did pre and post interviews. So at the beginning of the term, we asked them, you know, why does this project appeal to you? Why are you interested in hyper-flexible learning? What do you want to get out of this? And then at the end, we interviewed them again. And as you would imagine, we asked them, you know, what did this meet your expectation? You know, what was good for you? What was not so good for you? And so on. When it came to the staff perspective, we surveyed Bachelor of Arts teaching staff about their attitudes towards hyperflexible learning. And then for the staff who were running the hyperflexible units, they kept a teaching or a learning journal throughout the term, and we also interviewed them at the end of the term about their experience. So once we made it through ethics and we recruited our participants by emailing them in advance of the term starting, but we also emailed students who had the unit on their study plan but had not yet signed up. In the case that being able to do the unit in a hyperflex mode would entice them to take the unit on. And then we changed Moodle a little bit. So one thing we did originally was to get rid of weeks in Moodle and called them topics in an attempt to sort of encourage that idea that they could work through the unit at their own pace. They didn't have to work through it in weeks. It became all about topics. We also adjusted what they would see as the assessment slightly. So you can see at the top, the first lot of students had the due dates. The second lot of students had suggested submission dates rather than set due dates. For a whole range of issues, but most prominently governance, we did have to ask students to submit by the end of term, so they couldn't extend their work beyond the end of term. So participant numbers across 4 terms, we had a range of students. You can sort of see that for the most part, it was almost 50% of students in the course decided to sign up to the high flex approach, which was really interesting for us. In term 2, our advanced comms student unit only had 1 student, and it will be interesting for us to maybe explore why that was less of a popular option in that course. But we had some good numbers there across a range of communication and history subjects to investigate these. So our preliminary findings, and I do say preliminary, we're still going through the process of analysis. So when we're looking at our research questions, and we're really looking at kind of students, what do we find some students? Number 1 was flexibility. Participants said that flexibility was a really key driver for their drive to participate in the STRIVE project. Most students tended to submit their assessments around the same time as they would have been due anyway, or later. There were very few students who used it to submit earlier. And participants really noted that flexibility was the biggest strength of the high flex program. So they were able to take some extra time when they were struggling, or when they were trying to juggle 4 units that all had assessments falling on the same day, or that if they needed some extra time because a family member was sick or they were traveling for work, they didn't have to go through the assignment extension process and justify an extension. They could just self-adjust their time, which was great. Time and accountability was another big finding. So the participants who performed well in the unit said that while they still found accountability concern, but the students who performed most well had ways of keeping themselves accountable, whether that was calendars or a whole range of other tools. So encouraging students to find ways to keep them accountable to their own goals is really important. And students did want some more accountability, such as connections with other peers in the project, or the teacher reaching out when the participant was approaching some of their self-set milestones. For grades and retention, which I know are things everyone's very keen about now. So for the high flex students, grades either remained the same or they improved, which was really great. There were no negative impacts on grades for the high flex students. It doesn't appear to be enough to, I don't want to use the word safe, but to stop students who were already highly likely to attrit. So for a range of reasons that students already highly likely to attrit from the unit or from the course, the high flex approach does not prevent that. That student is still on a pathway to attrit. But for other students, the flexibility did mean they were able to successfully pass the course. So for one participant, they said, if it wasn't for the flexibility in this unit, I wouldn't have gotten there. The whole household got sick. If it wasn't for flex, I wouldn't have passed. So flexibility or high flex can really sort of help those students who have unexpected issues pop up through the term and can help them continue to submit successfully. So on the staff side, we asked all the BA staff what they thought about Hyperflex. There were some, generally positive attitudes saying that high flex would be suitable for undergraduate learning in their discipline. However, there were some concerns. 50% of the staff said that they think undergraduate units struggle without firm assessment deadlines, and 72% said that assessment deadlines allowed them to plan their workload more effectively. So what we found in the unit is that thankfully high flex doesn't add to staff workloads, it just changes the way that time is conceptualized for staff as well. We've also learned that there's planning and lots of tools that need to go into this to make this smoother for staff as well, which I was excited to see my colleagues talking about in their abstract, so I'm keen to see what's in the next presentation in that regard. So what's next in our lessons? So our lessons are that HighFlex does not appear effective at preventing attrition in students who are likely to attrit anyway. More assistance is needed with helping students keep accountable to their own goals, and that students who show strong self-efficacy and self-regulated learning behaviours perform extremely well. So finding a way to identify these students as good candidates for a HighFlex program will be important. So ultimately, is this a viable option for undergraduate students? It is, but it needs to be combined with other tools to take advantage of self-regulated learning approaches so students can make an informed decision before committing to HighFlex. And I'm happy to stop that there.
Thank you, Amy. I think you have done wonderfully well. We still have 8 minutes remaining, so we have plenty of opportunity to discuss. And I already have a wonderful question from Sandra, and she's asking Amy, I have lots of questions about this approach, which I find very interesting. However, our first question from her, how scalable is this approach, for example, to 900 students? And the second one, Amy, is how do you handle issues around return of assessment feedback and academic integrity issue? So,
Absolutely.
Amy?
Thanks, Sandra. So look, scalable the approach, the way we did it, not particularly, but that's because in the undergraduate space, we don't have a lot of tools and systems that would automate some of what we did. I'm hoping that the Be Different team will talk about some of their, and Colin, I can see you're there, some of their amazing tools. They get lots of fun things to play with that do automate some of this process. And so incorporating some of that would be vital to make it scalable. I think the Be Different team have done a very good job in making it scalable in a postgraduate space, and in an undergraduate space, you would need to do those similar approaches. Handling issues around assessment feedback and academic integrity, great questions. The ethics team had a lot of those similar questions as well when we were pushing through for ethics approvals. In some instances, in some of the units, we changed the assessment topic. So the HighFlex students had a equal but different topic. So let's say last year there would have been 10 essay topics to choose from. This year, 5 of them were designated to the standard students, and 5 of them was for the HighFlex students. So that meant that, you know, if a student got their feedback 2 weeks before everybody else, it wasn't there wasn't an academic integrity issue there. Within our courses themselves, we use a lot of reflection, a lot of other tools and assessment types that aren't particularly prone to academic integrity issues, and follow best practice in that regard. So it wasn't too much of an issue, but it would absolutely be something that we'd need to keep an eye on or further investigate.
So thank you, Amy. We have another question from Claire. Her main concern or question relates to staff marking, etc. If students are all handing in an assessment at different times.
Absolutely. Again, because we had fairly small numbers, it was quite manageable, and I can see that scaling that, and you'd need systems, of course, to do that. From a staff perspective, it was actually it was a redistribution of your workload. So normally as an academic, you know you're getting into marking, you buy the big bag of chocolate, you sit there and you just get through it, and it's hell, but you do it. In some ways this was quite advantageous because they just drip through and they'd be really lovely and really nice, and you'd knock off 1, you'd knock off 2. It was really important to have tools. You needed a marking guide, you needed a rubric, you needed to have those very firm systems to go back to. But staff didn't specifically have any issues with workload or with the way the marking came in. It wasn't insurmountable. It was a different way of working, but not a harder or more time-consuming way of working.
I think in some cases as a marker, we find it actually beneficial to have different time slot to mark different students, so not all coming at the same time. But I understand what Claire is saying. Sometimes it is easier to drift from the specific marking situation. So I have another question from Katie. She's wrote, I'm interested to hear if this HighFlex approach was delivered with synchronous learning opportunity. If so, am I correct in assuming that staff just had to follow a weekly approach, regardless of where HighFlex students may be in their own study progression? Amy, you can see it in the chat as well. So if it
Lovely.
is too long for you.
Thanks, Katie. And this is why the BA was such a great program for testing out this as a concept, because we don't necessarily have really strict synchronous learning like there are in other schools, in the sense that we've mostly already done away with the weekly lecture. We've mostly already done away with a lot of those synchronous forced kind of participation. So it was really well suited in that a lot of our students are working at their own pace anyway. We're used to working with adult learners. We're used to working with people who have jobs and kids and dogs and are jumping in and out at all times. So that wasn't necessarily a problem per se that we had to overcome in this study. But you're absolutely right. It would be really interesting to think about that if the unit was already pre-planned to be very much in a weekly set structure. That would have to be something that would need to be addressed.
Amy, Afros has requested you to kindly share screen and show us Be Different platform to see if it is any different to the current Moodle at CQ.
So I'm not part of the Be Different team, but my wonderful colleague Colin is presenting next, and he may be able to support us with some of those, or by talking about the Be Different platform in a little bit more depth.
So Colin, do you want to highlight on that, or do you have anything to share?
I can't share my screen, so because I'm an admin on that site, I haven't got permission to automatically student details will show up, so I'm happy to take that up offline.
All right, no worries. And Kate said that I like the flex approach and agree it would benefit many of our cohort and who have multiple competing priorities. However, like Sandra, for us, there would be concerns for planning for marking and staff casual contracts, etc. So lots of thank you and compliments for Amy and her team here. So I'm sure Amy will look at it. So we still have some time for this presentation, 2 minutes left. So if anyone have any other question, happy to raise your hand or just unmute yourself and tell us. Otherwise, we'll move to the next one.